An Irish independent digital subscription doesn't just get you the news. It gets you the best of Ireland's stories all in one place. Whether it's the best of politics, business, sport, entertainment or lifestyle. Get it all for just €4 a month for 12 months when you first subscribe. Visit independent.ie/subscribe today. Irish Independent. Terms and conditions apply. Cancel anytime.
I was out with my parents last night after the thing before gosh, which I'm sex.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So at one stage, my dad said, Conan. I said, yeah, Conan. And he said, what age is he? And I said,
God.
Kind of my age, I think. And he said, I thought just by the sound of his voice he was in his 50s or his 60s.
Is that worse than what you look like being older?
No. If my dad saw you and thought you were in your 50s, that would be way worse.
It's like, God, he looks 10 years older.
Has anyone ever said that before? I don't hear it personally. I don't think you sound in your 50s or 60s.
Never heard. No, I thought you were actually going to say, shows how sad it is. I thought you were going to say you sounded younger.
No,
you don't get that either. You're like, no.
You're 50s.
Paul was editing my first contributions and he was like, are you from Dundalk? I was like, is it that obvious?
Brilliant.
I thought I moderated that a little bit.
You're not a very Dundalk sounding person.
Well, he's also from that part of the world.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be one to know one kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe that.
Okay, Paul, I think you guys shoot. We'll follow your lead with the music. Happy Monday, everybody. A new week. Republic of Ireland once again to the forefront of our thoughts. Greece 2, Ireland 0. Comprehensive Greek win, albeit a very decent last 20-minute showing from Ireland at 1-0 down. And then Ray Houghton went and gave Caoimhín Keller the man of the match. Talked at length about him for a minute. Happy to say once again, Conan here, hello.
Hi, Joe.
Ronan, hello to you.
Hi, Joe.
I don't think anybody was getting too ahead of themselves after the Finland performance, in particular the Finland win, and I suppose last night was a fairly comprehensive reminder of just where we are. Greece, especially in the first half, were just so thoroughly better than us in pretty much every way that it was an acceptable Irish effort, I would say, in many respects, but also somewhat chastening.
But isn't it amazing that it feels acceptable now 1 month later? Like the Greece defeat last month felt like it wasn't on, and it felt annoying because the manager had sort of taken a step back, and you do get a win in between, a good win. You see shoots of recovery, you see somebody taking control, you see somebody that's actually, I'm really getting on board with this guy now, and we see Greece going to England and winning, and we see them playing really well, and now suddenly this game is all right to lose as long as we play well. And you said the last 20 minutes, I thought that this whole second half was a really heartening performance from Ireland.
They were very good, weren't they?
Yeah. I was just going to say I was going to preface everything I say here by how impressive Greece were, because the Greece version of Indosport must be like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Because it's not in the too distant past where Gus Poyet was looking at this as a sideways move to come to Ireland. Now you're looking at Greece, 12 points from 12. They're flying,
Yeah.
So they were really impressive, and maybe Ireland grew into the game. Credit to them for that, but maybe there was a little bit of Greece having expended so much energy against England, both emotional and physical, and that was obviously displayed at the end. But yeah, I'd echo what you both have said there. I think there's positive notes that we can draw upon. I'm sort of wary of falling into the trap of moral victories too quickly, but if we can build on what we've seen in this international window, to be able to say that phrase is nice, to build on what we've seen in this window, because there seemed to have been maybe a couple of false dawns, but of late, not very much.
I think you can say moral victory about a 1-0 or 2-0 draw. I'm not sure 2-0 loss you can say moral victory.
Yeah.
Even at a push.
What is the next step down from a moral victory?
We didn't disgrace ourselves.
Is that really? There's no in between.
Maybe there should be. Will we hear from Heimir Hallgrimsson talking to Tony O'Donoghue last night?
It kind of feels like once we concede a goal, the pressure is kind of gone. So we start to have more belief in what we are doing. It was the same against Finland. We had then a half time to talk, after the goal. Now it happened very early in the first half, maybe third, fourth minute in the second half, sorry. I thought after the goal we grew into the game. It was more belief in everything that we were doing, passing, playing forward, pressing, and no, you know, we said before the game, we knew there was a wave coming at us. Just the kind of atmosphere is like that, and I thought, even though they were better first half, we stayed in the game, didn't concede a goal. I think the structure kind of held. We held it with structure, but they were better than us by far in the first half. But still, okay, 1-0 down, tough game, but we could turn it, and we turned it around to our kind of benefit. So got some chances, kept the ball much better, moved the ball much better.
You stopped the bleeding. The victory in Finland probably did that. How hopeful are you for the future now?
It's like I said, it's a good team. It's good players. With maybe too little belief to go into games like this. At this level, you need to, you need to have your chest forward when you play games. You need to be on the front foot, and it seems we need a moment to get that. Normally, to concede last two games, to start playing as we know we can, but there's belief in this. There's belief in this team for sure, and I have belief in these guys, and I hope that people have seen that this team can be really, really good on that day.
I'm starting to really like Heimir Hallgrimsson. I think he speaks a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Very straightforward, very honest. It was interesting. Josh Cullen was asked by Tony later on in the evening about conceding the goal once again in that period just after half time. It's kind of our MO in many respects now. We tend to do it so often. He made an interesting point where he said that, we need to look at it, and he ventured the theory that at half time quite often, not least because maybe they're behind or they're struggling, but there's a real intention to get out there and get in the front foot. Let's go. And actually maybe there's a bit too much abandon in those first 5-10 minutes after the half-time break. So that was an interesting thought. But on Hallgrimsson and his feeling that we just have too little belief going into games like this, I think that's true. And it's a difficult thing to turn around, because obviously if your belief and your confidence is not based on some kind of evidence, then it's just wild fantasy and delusional. So it's hard to magic up belief and confidence. But I do think with this team, we're never going to out-talent the opposition very often. So I do think that kind of dogged belief is going to be a really vital ingredient. And I think in Irish teams of yesteryear, it really was. You think of that kind of the mindset of the team when they played the Dutch in 01. I suspect it was there. We have a belief that we're going to do it today. And it applies to all sports. I have kind of four kings in my head still, but you think of somebody like Steve Collins before the Eubank fight. There was just this kind of aura of, I'm going to do it. You're a GA lover. You think of Tyrone when they make up their mind on a certain year. Now, what happens the other years, I don't know.
Or a certain week.
A certain week. But there's this kind of tangible almost aura about them. This current Irish team has none of that for obvious reasons. And I think that's what Hallgrimsson's getting at. This isn't just like a vague, we lack belief line. I think he really means this, because he would have seen it with Iceland, not least against England, I suppose, in 2016, this sense of we're really well organised, we're going to work like dogs, and a kind of looking around the dressing room, this is on here, we're really going to go close. And Ireland don't have that. I think that's what he's trying to tap into, and I buy it. I think he's onto something there. I think that is a real issue with this team at the moment.
It's an ambush. Like, that's what it is, and you can't perform an ambush unless you know you have the tools to do it, unless you have the plan to do it, and you have the grit as well. Yeah, to go and
a little bit angry, a little bit of resolve.
Exactly.
All that
knowing,
stuff.
we are underdogs, but we're going to ambush them here, because we know when we get it right, they're going to be shocked, and we're going to find their weakness and hit it. And like that is what Ireland's missing. But it's amazing that Hallgrimsson points that out as well, because it'd be so easy for a manager to say, look at the stats in the second half, we were really good. We've heard it loads over the past with all our managers. We performed really well, we're playing some great stuff. But he knows we played some great stuff because we went 1-0 down and Greece stepped back. And for somebody to have the confidence to say that as well, and I suppose the wherewithal, because we're seeing that with his changes in the last two games as well. I think he's got a good sense of a game. I think he smells what the game needs. Yeah, he's made the right changes.
There's a pragmatism in a good way to him, because look, you're alluding obviously to Stephen Kenny. It did become tiresome as the tenure drew on, that you felt he was manipulating stats and different kind of facts and figures to suit his own agenda, and it just didn't really stack up. So I think we're all quite open to somebody like Hallgrimsson saying these things, which are critical of the team in some respects, but also fair.
And more broadly, I probably have more of a graph for the quote-unquote old school analysis than others. You know,
did you think Greece just wanted it more than us?
Well, to use an example, the rudimentary, I'm going to use air quotes again, but like the rudimentary analysis of like Graham Souness or Roy Keane or someone, people like guffaw at that now. I'm like, there is something to be said for that. And it seems to get downplayed. It gets lost in the stats matrix a little bit. And I just think it's something we alluded to as a culture in Irish fandom, that the good spirit will elicit something good. And I think that's true. Like, you look at Nathan Collins, right? He's got the athletic profile to be a top player. And there's something, just a small mentality tweak needed in him. And he's the captain, obviously, so he's emblematic of a lot of this. So I just think a little tweak in him might, go through the whole team. Does that make sense?
It does. You want a little bit more Mick Byrne, we're going to do them for you.
Yeah, but I want Nathan Collins to be like, he's obviously aware of how athletically gifted he is. If he could, parlay that into like flawless concentration levels, we'd have like a really unbelievable player on our hands. And me and Colin were just like, to speak of like positive things that we can point to. There's a lot of pace in this team, which there hasn't been in previous teams. And you look at Evan Ferguson is going to be the totem that hopefully that's where our attacking play in the long term will be built around. He's not blessed with that pace. But if you've got runners off him, there's dynamism in midfield that we haven't had for a long time. To my uncredited coaching opinion, I think Sammy Smaddox, for example, might be better deployed in a more central position. It feels like he's one of our sparky players, and he seems to be spending a lot of his time dogging his way back, up the touchline. So that would be my sense of it.
By the by, and Gary Breen and Damien Delaney are on the way with, no doubt, brilliant analysis of the game and the picture overall. That was such a penalty for Evan Ferguson in the first minute or two. I mean, we don't need to dwell on it. I don't think we would have won the game necessarily, but it really was just the most blatant penalty I've ever seen. His standing leg was completely taken out. He miscues the ball completely. Yeah. And even he doesn't seem to claim it's a penalty.
Not to sound like Roy Keane or to pander to Ronan then with this sort of analysis, but he still should have scored anyway.
I don't know. I think if you're cleaned out like that, it's very hard. Your balance is gone. You're all over the shop, but you're going to miscue the ball. But I was just amazed that all of the Irish players weren't up in arms, that he wasn't up in arms, that VAR didn't even have a glance at it. It was just so nailed on.
And it felt like that first half then sort of that almost set the tone where it was like, well, these guys aren't going to kick up too much of a fuss. Maybe. I just feel like we were on the wrong side of those decisions. Obviously, we're away from home in a tough atmosphere. And Ireland, I do feel like they're a bit unlucky as well. I mean, Josh Cullen can talk about being too open, but I thought we had that bit of grittiness that we're talking about. Our structure wasn't ripped apart. Greece were really good, but it wasn't like we were completely just sliced apart. Like we got a lot of blocks in, we kept together. Even the goal, like it was a brilliant move from Greece, and we still Collins gets across and makes the block, and it deflects away then from Keller.
Would suit the two boys think. I've heard that a lot of commentary that actually defensively, not bad. We well set up. I think we were kind of cut apart a fair bit.
Think so?
I really do. I mean, they completely dominated the flanks. I mean, Richard Dunn, for instance, I saw on Virgin making the point that we sort of surrendered the flanks to them and said, well, let's just get tight and organised through the middle. And that's fine. But they also sliced through us through the middle quite a lot. I felt. There's a reason Caoimhin Kelleher had one of the great first halves of his life. And it wasn't because defensively we was a shutout. So no, I thought against Iceland in the second half in particular, we were wide open. It was a kind of frenetic, wild game. And they had big chances, which we talked about. We were a bit lucky with the header and the Kamara shot. And I was worried going to Athens in that respect. And I did think they fairly cut us open, I felt. But anyway, as you said, last-ditch blocks and efforts. That was all there to the fore, for sure.
I felt a lot of the saves that Kelleher made, if they had gone in, I would have been disappointed as well. And
that's his job.
Exactly. And I think if you give your keeper those opportunities, then that's not bad defensively.
Do you want some emails before we rattle on?
Love it.
So Owen O'Dardy says, hi guys, as you go through different narratives of what to talk about with Ireland after last night's defeat, please consider that Ireland are playing without a specialist right back, without a specialist left back. Our three wingers are unestablished at club or international level. Mikey Johnson, McAteer, Festi, thanks, good luck with the show is one email in. Hey, Joe, great to have you back on my podcast list, says Noel. However, is there any chance you can reduce the length of the podcast to 1 hour per day? I'm struggling to fit all your podcasts in as I already have other podcasts and I only have limited time and I don't want to unsubscribe to your show. Regards, Noel.
Brilliant.
Noel, listen, I don't think that's really a possibility. Ditch your other podcasts. It's a very simple situation. I don't know if I should break this to Noel now or not, but we do have a second podcast coming today. We'll chat through any other business from the weekend, and then Ian Madigan was going to join us to talk about the weekend's rugby. Given in advance the significance of how big Leinster-Munster felt and Croke Park, and obviously the Irish International in the football, we decided to take a rain check on Not the Monday panel. We probably at that stage thought the rugby would deliver a bit more. It was a bit of a wet blanket of a game in some respects, certainly after the first 20 minutes. Game Belfast was arguably better, but more of that anon. So there's no Not the Monday panel today. There's definitely not a Monday panel today. Would it be possible, wonders Pat, to have the podcast out at 3 or 3:30 daily for those that work from home and like to listen? 4 p.m. release leaves a very small window. But surely you're not knocking off your work from home until 5.
Oh,
I don't understand, Pat.
Yeah.
Really enjoying the pod so far and wish you continued success with it. Thank you very much. Pat, we will absolutely endeavour to do that. Indeed, this very podcast you're listening to now, well, listen, if you want to knock off at 1 or 2 o'clock today, Pat, that's just fine. We're here for you. There'll be certain days where it's not possible. For instance, Joe Canning is coming in tomorrow to talk about his book, and that interview is at 2 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll get that up ASAP afterwards. But on days where we can, we'll start getting it out a little bit earlier. And then final point of order, Rory and UCD.
Oh, is he back?
He's not back, but we're a little bit disappointed in the young man. False information, fake news from Rory's email.
Oh.
You'll
I
remember.
thought you were going to start singing, I guess that's why they call it the blues by Elton John. But you actually have a different point.
So you'll remember from Rory's email that the Finland game, it was the karaoke was interrupted at the UCD SU bar to announce that Liam Scales has just become. By the way, this was a UCD announcement on UCD turf. Like this wasn't. We didn't make this up. This was Rory's email. Everybody. It was announced that Liam Scales has just become the first UCD graduate to score for the Republic of Ireland men's team.
Yeah.
And we thought, wow, that's a moment. Bit surprised there was no one else. But yeah, maybe, I guess, college not a thing for kids going over to the UK early. A deluge of emails. My own father-in-law amongst the fraternity. So Daniel Landers was especially not happy. He was like, Liam Scales is, and then in capitals, not the first UCD graduate to score for Ireland. The brilliant, and it seems forgotten, Kevin Moran.
Oh my God.
Kevin Moran scored 6 goals and 71 appearances for Ireland.
That's a big one.
Put some respect,
Yeah.
etc. I had a look. Kevin Moran studied commerce, UCD.
Yeah.
He's a talented man, wasn't he? So, it was announced to UCD students like Rory that it was Liam Scales, and it seems they've forgotten Kevin Moran around the UCD SU bar. So maybe a little history lesson might be in order.
Yeah, Rory is just collateral here. Like this is not his fault. This is the DJ at the karaoke bar.
Who is that DJ?
In UCD.
Yeah.
And Rory was up front, said, I've only been watching Ireland since 2016.
The second Mick McCarthy year.
So this is not on Rory.
No, but happy to make that announcement. Kevin Moran. Oh.
No, he did it again.
Oh, no.
I thought you did it on purpose.
I didn't. I did that earlier as
my
well.
God. Yeah, that's why I thought you were doing it ironically.
No.
Paul McGrath.
Jeez. It's not terrible how that gets into your...
And what's the other one? Mark Kinsella.
Docherty.
Mark Kinsella.
Yeah, Kinsella.
I'll just say. We'll save it for the next podcast.
But aren't Liam and Noel the Gallaghers? Did the UK audience call them the Gallaghers?
They call them the Gallagher.
Do they?
Yeah.
But I would never even... I'd always call them the Gallagher brothers.
I even think they call themselves that, but they just...
But that's their Irish, obviously,
Yeah.
grounding, yeah.
Dermot Gallagher.
Yeah. But we can't even...
Let's not try and unwrap
what all
that
the
one.
Gallaghers can you make? We can't even agree amongst
Dublin.
ourselves. Though. Like, when does Keane become Kane in Ireland? I'm very confused at that. It seems to be
Mayo people
Kerry
like it.
Mayo.
Yeah, think. But listen, I think we can all agree it's not Moran, so I apologise. Let's get on to Damien and Gary.
Oh, Kelleher is in trouble here. Is this the second and the clinching goal? It is.
Kelleher, just clear your lines. When the Ireland players go on your line, you can't always play out from the back.
Well, it was an avoidable goal on Thursday night, and this was an avoidable one as well.
Well then, you two, let's get into it. Gary, give us the overview of the performance first before Delaney comes in. I'll let you set the tone.
Oh, no, I was dreading being asked to go first. I was hoping to react to the same moment there. sobering again, really. Nothing we haven't seen before. This is going to be a process. I've said this before, Joe, in terms of where we are. It's a low bar where we're starting from. There's going to have to be big improvements to get us where we are hopefully challenging for qualification for tournaments. But so I think Heimir's going to do a lot of chopping and changing, even though he says he wants to play a consistent 11 who play most games so they know exactly their roles. And I think the very fact that he's used so many players early on shows that he's still trying to come to terms with what players fit, what remit he has for them. A lot of that research he's done would have been data driven off a wire scout. Now he's getting the opportunity. Now he's seen them in action and he's seen what their strengths are and ultimately and unfortunately seen what their weaknesses are also.
Damien?
I think maybe the manager underestimated how low the confidence was in the group. You know, this is a team that's been beaten an awful lot over the last 3 years and lost to some pretty poor teams. And that has an effect on you. You know, that has an effect on the team, the morale, the ability to win games, the confidence that he continuously talks about, the lack of confidence that the players have. I mean, that doesn't just happen because of one bad result. It can happen because of one bad result, but the scar tissue that's left on this team for the last 3 years is going to take a little bit of time to undo. So I think immediately for him, it's about stopping the bleeding. You know, can he turn the ship around again and moving in the right direction? I think he can. But I think at the moment, it's just he needs to stop the bleeding and try and instill a little bit of confidence in this team. The Finland result, we can't underestimate how big that was. That was massive for him. And then last night's game, you know, if you're looking for positives, I don't think Greece had their way with us. I don't think they absolutely wiped the floor like they did in the past with us. Yes, the result was 2-0. But I like the way we set up. I like the way that we made it difficult for Greece, bearing in mind that this is a team coming in on the back of huge result against England. And I think he watched what Greece did to England and saw what they did and realised, well, we can't do that. So we sat in a defensive shape. That doesn't mean you can be proactive and on the front foot. You can be, even in a defensive shape. But I felt that we took away Greece's biggest strength, which was the counter-attack, and denied them space and asked them a different question. Can you guys find a different way to beat us? And unfortunately, Greece found that way in the game last night, which all good sides will do. But I think it was a nice jump-off point for the manager. The first camp was obviously a recce to see what was what. But I think we started to see his imprint coming into this team. I like listening to him. I genuinely do. I like his interviews afterwards. He says all the right things. You know, he's critical of the players. He's critical of what we're lacking in terms of the lack of confidence, the lack of front foot, you know, when Ireland are at their best. So I think he recognises the issues, and it's going to be a long road for him to get it back to where we all want it to be.
Gary, heard you agree there. You like how Hallgrimsson talks about the game?
Yeah, no, I really do like how he conducts himself. I think he's honest, and he talk about things like Jekyll and Hyde performances. He doesn't put too much spin on it. He doesn't try to trick us as such, you know, and that's a reference to the previous regime. We know what we're seeing. He knows what he's seeing, and he knows that he's a work in progress. It was interesting to see or to hear what Damo said about that he'd watched the England game. I felt, and listened to his comments, I felt he watched us in Greece away the last time. He talked about how the Greeks started so strongly in that game about 14 months ago. And it was interesting. I felt that he looked at that and was worried about how we would set up. On that day, we played that 3-5-2, and we had real problems, notably Smallbone, getting out from midfield to wide areas to try and stop Tsimikas and the ability that they had getting forward in their fullback positions. As a result, then, he set up in a 4-4-2. And it seemed to me, Dame, I don't know if you agree, that the four in midfield, and I'm always wary when we play two central midfielders. I don't think we're good enough to do that. But he played both the two wide men so narrow, and he played the two centre forwards dropping deep on. So that front six was really tight. And he literally said to Greece, have the wide areas. We're not even going to contest that. Go out there, you can have them wide, and we'll engage you then, try and break us down. So I could see how he's thinking in terms of taking this Ireland team forward. And I felt that that's probably the best way to go for us, to simplify it, to make it easier. So there's no grey areas where these players seem to be falling in between certain ways of playing and stuff. I don't think they're anywhere near where it will be when it's really nailed on. But I thought that was fascinating, that first half. Even though it looked like we conceded so much of the ball to the Greece, didn't we? Because they were so strong.
Yeah. I don't think that he envisaged us playing like this forever.
No.
But I think that the way he set up last night was a way to stop the bleeding, to try and give a little bit of confidence to the team and just feel some way solid. And then that's your jump off point, and you build from there into what he wants us to be. Like, you can't go from where we were, the lack of confidence, to where we want to be. There's a process. And I think he's moving through that now. And the Finland game was huge. And I think the performance, he can hang his hat on a certain few things, that we made it difficult for Greece. We didn't give them the open spaces that they want. We made them work for it. We did a piece last night, myself and Donny were watching the game, just little things. I think our centre-backs dropped too deep too early watching the game last night, because even in a low block, you can still be proactive and on the front foot. So even when you drop into a low block, you want your midfield players to snap out 5-10 yards to get pressure on the ball. You want your wide players to bounce out and get pressure on the ball, your full-backs. But you also want your centre-backs as well. And I think too often, looking at a lot of the problems Greece called us last night, our two centre-backs, Scales and Collins, are on the back foot too early, and they just take 2 steps too deep. And then the midfield players jump the 4 or 5 yards that the manager is looking for, because he wants us to be on the front foot. And then the little pocket of space develops in front of the two centre-backs. We did a piece on it last night. And it's, I think wide players come into it. You look at all the chances Greece created in that opening, that kind of 10-minute period in the middle part or middle third of the half. It was all because of that. And I think that if the manager is going to talk about us being a front foot team, the centre-backs have to be brave. Like, they have to. When the centre midfield players bounce, the centre-backs have to hold the line, if not go with them. Okay, so you leave yourself exposed on the backside, and maybe every now and again, you might get caught, but you want your goalkeeper to have the starting position. I'm not talking about pressing her up the pitch now. I'm talking when we're in a low block. There was too many times I felt, even in a low block, that they found little pockets of space between the midfield and the centre-backs. And our centre-backs just drop off, I think, too early.
There's definitely an issue based on the confidence, as Damo's saying there, with the two centre halves, whoever they are, because when you watch us playing, there's a nervousness, there's an anxiousness in terms of how we defend. It's quite a lot of kind of just getting there, and just like there's no real composure back there. And if you think about the lads that we do have, for their club teams, they show it. So there's definitely a kind of problem in terms of how desperate they are to do well for Ireland and how poor the results have been. And there is that little bit of a panic that you just see them, rather than just being, right, I'm holding this position, I'm not going to be too affected by the movements because I'm in a good starting position, my body shape's right. But you're right, they just suddenly will drop. One will drop, then the other one will notice he's dropped. He panics, they both drop, and then suddenly that kind of assuredness you need at international in that back line, just not quite there for the players who are showing it at their club level.
It's a protection mode, Green, isn't it? Like, because when you're nervous and you're lacking confidence, and I've been there, and I know you probably have too.
Yeah, of course we have.
Like when midfield players have the ball and things aren't going well, but you feel a little bit, we can't concede. Your natural reaction is to drop deep, protect yourself in behind, because you go, well, if I can defend in behind, I can deal with anything that happens in front of me. Yeah. It takes a real brave, confident centre-back to hold a high line. Or when you see, let's say I'm left side centre-back, and the left side centre midfield player, which was Colin the other night, Colin bounces out. As a centre-back, when it's on your side, you can go in there as well. You have to go in, because if Colin bounces out and the ball gets spun around the corner, like, you as a centre-back have to back your mate up, and you need to close that gap. And I just felt that, we did a piece on it last night. Like, we showed clips of it, what we were saying. And it was something notable. And I think me and Donny kind of agreed as well, that we started seeing it, especially those chances. You watch them back again, that 10-minute period where they had 10 efforts on goal, or 15-minute period. A lot of it was that. So as soon as pressure came on, the defence mechanism of the centre-backs was to just drop off. And I think the manager wants the complete opposite. Like, when you feel like you're under pressure, be brave, hold a high line, because he said last night, stick your chest out, keep your chin up, and play with confidence. And I think that's something he's going to look at.
That's so interesting, fella, because I have to say, I'm sure like a lot of people, I'm watching the game and you see them in their 4-4-2 and it's a mid to low block and you think, okay, they should be reasonably set here. And yet there were all of these pockets between back four and midfield where the chances came from. And it's no coincidence, I think, when we have centre-back pundits on, they look at the game through the prism of centre-backs, midfielders look at it through the prism midfielders. But I dare say you're right. And as you've explained it, it's a perfectly natural thing. Those guys are feeling vulnerable. Let's take 4 or 5 yards back. But then boom. And Greece didn't need to be asked twice. They were really good. You can't analyse Ireland in isolation. Greece were good, but they really took advantage of those pockets then between defence and midfield. And you're kind of goose then. Then I would think you're even more inclined to step back because it's like we're under the cosh here.
Yeah, and you know as well, you start arguing with your centre midfield players then, because I've had that so much where a centre midfield player will go and press the opposition midfield player, the ball will get popped around the corner into a pocket of space, and then your midfield player is screaming at you.
Yeah.
Like, that can't be the case. Like, if I go, you have to come with me, because now you've made me look stupid. Okay, I didn't quite get there, but, the ball around the corner, you have to get that next one. And that's the level of confidence I think the manager is talking about. Listening to him talking after the game.
Yeah.
I like the fact that he said as well, one thing I liked is that we only start playing when we go behind, which is a lack of confidence, and that's so accurate and it's so refreshing in relation to what Gary said there. But previously, it's an honest assessment, and you can't argue with it. And I think he sees it, and now it's just up to him to find a way to work around it.
Gary, just the last one on that point you're making about the depth of the back four within a low block. Ultimately, I presume centre-half's responsibility, but in a perfect world, you'd love a keeper to recognise it and be screaming at his back four. You'd love the midfielders to be screaming. I don't know. I look at Cullen, I look at Knight, I look at Kelleher. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm seeing enough voices there to rectify that on the hoof.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong, Joe. You can hear people or watch players shouting all the time. Not really shouting anything. Nonsense, really. Come on, lads, all this type of stuff. It's the information that you need to be given, and that's the key thing, problem solvers. And this group doesn't really have them. You've got a young captain who will captain Ireland. I want to clarify that. There's no doubt he's good enough to captain Ireland, but when I was suggesting that maybe not yet because of the errors he's making, take that extra pressure away from him and let him show his quality. But as a whole, and it's so interesting because I keep referencing what Heimir said about going back to that original game that he watched Ireland away in Greece. And on that day, Cullen and Malumbi were sitting right on top of the centre halves. So it's a complete difference. So there was no 10 area, but what it just allowed in that game was Greece to dictate play from midfield. There was no pressure on them getting their heads up and what have you. It is a difficult one in terms of finding the right balance in central midfield because Knight tears around the place, of course he does, but at times you just need people who control the game. They haven't got to be crashing into challenges. They just need to be looking after the ball for 5-6 seconds at a time and just take it off of the opposition, create a bit of calmness within the team. That's ultimately your centre midfielder's role. Get the ball, dictate play. And when you do that, then your centre-halves can just, within that 5 or 6 seconds, can get further up the pitch. They can go a couple of more, feel comfortable. We got good possession. Don't get me wrong. We're terrible for ball retention. Don't get me wrong. But if those midfielders get on the ball for 4 or 5 seconds, as a defence, you can look around either side. Your goalkeeper's going to say, right, we're up. We're up 4 or 5 yards here. We're in good shape. We're happy. We'll give options. And you play from there. And ultimately, I just feel that he's still finding who are his right players, bearing in mind that he's gone from as in the first game, as that kind of second striker picking up the midfield to 2 out-and-out centre forward. So it's still a learning process for him and for us watching.
Here's one for you, Gary. You think the 2 centre-backs have the mobility to do what we're talking about? Would there an argument to be made that Omobamidele and Darragh O'Shea are a more mobile or more
Damo, you
dynamic?
know, I've said this so many times, pace is overrated at centre-back. It is because, and I've said this, Kenny Cunningham was so slow, but he never got run because he could read the situation. He would press the thing up. And even if you look back on iconic centre-backs like Mick McCarthy, Kevin Moran against Lineker and all those guys, they were pressing up high up the pitch to condense it. So it's a great tool to have, pace. But even in that kind of that first game, too often our centre-halves would look like they were favourites and just got running behind. It was strange. It was, so it has to be confidence-based. It can't be ability because
I know.
Proving it at club level.
Yeah, I know, but I just think that like Omobamidele is a modern, prototypical modern day centre back. Dynamic, I suppose, is the word I would use. Darragh O'Shea is quite mobile as well. Hence, he can slot from centre back out to right back and not look out of shape. I just think sometimes Scales and Collins do look sometimes on the turn. A couple of balls get spun down the side, and they just look a little bit heavy-footed, really. But I think that's something the manager's going to have to look at.
Fellas, curious for your thoughts on then Ireland with the ball. Difficult to say much about it in the first half. Greece had 70+% possession. So maybe it's more of a second half conversation. So we had Cullen and Knight in midfield. Knight touched the ball 19 times across the game. He was very much in the periphery of it to that extent. And Cullen, I think...
that's an incredible stat, Joe, isn't it, for your centre midfielder?
It is. And Cullen, of his 50 touches, I think passed it to his back four goalkeeper well over half the number of his 50 touches. So that was kind of our midfield engine. And we've Smodics and we've Ogbene and then the 2 boys up top. So talk to us about all that, Gary.
Well, that's the difficulty, isn't it? Because we're talking about, can we get Evan to replicate the form that he showed before his injuries at Brighton. And as you just said there, Joe, if you ain't getting a ball from your centre midfielders, who are you actually getting it from? And that's the concern, is that it may well be a hangover again. And listen, I'm not like, just using a stick to it, but it was so much of that stuff in a previous regime, wasn't it? Square passes back, recycle the ball. And I think at times you see the reaction of Heimir on the touchline, and he's like, pass forward early. And he's continually having to say it. So it's not being done instinctively by these players. So it needs to be changed. I think he will do it, but that's going to take time from the coaching staff. And if you think about what you want from those offensive players, and certainly Smodic, he needs to be central for me. I don't know how he's going to fit him in there, but he has to come off that left wing. He's doing shifts, helping out, dogging back. That's not his strength. His strength is getting sight of the goal. So he's going to have to find solutions.
Damon, I heard you say you agree on the Smodic
point. I do. I think he's a match winner. Him. He's the icing on the cake. He's the cherry, so to speak. He's such a good footballer, and he's so willing as well. I mean, even when you ask him to play out on that left wing, he does put the shift in. He does run back. But again, he's burning valuable energy there, tracking back, and he does track back. So you want him to be as fresh as possible in central areas. Like, you want your best players in the middle of the pitch, where they're on the ball regularly, where they're getting good possession in positive areas. I mean, listen, he's willing to do it, and he does do it, but you need to find a way to get him in. Like yesterday, I know it was a 4-4 kind of 1-1. Parrott was dropping more than Ferguson to try and help out the midfield. But if you got Smodic doing that, I think he'd be a right live wire, in that number 10 from defensive point of view as well. So I think he would be rattling around the opposition midfield players, pressing from the backside. So, he's kind of coming back and getting pressure on the number 6 to force passes to hurry him. And then obviously when we turn the ball over, he's in a central area where we can just fire the ball into him, and he's well able to take it under pressure. He can take it in traffic. His footwork, his awareness is superb when the ball gets fired into him. So I think if you could get him in that 10 area, which I think will start to happen as we move forward. In fairness, I did think Troy Parrott had a reasonable game last night. He put a shift in, watched him over the last number of years in an Ireland jersey, and you're kind of watching him going, what is he? What's his attributes? What's he good at? But he's gone out to the Netherlands, and he's getting regular football now, and he actually looks very fit. I thought he put in an amazing shift last night, in fairness to him. He worked really hard, and he showed some nice touches when the ball came into him. So it's nothing to do with his performance. I think he's going to be a reasonable player for us moving forward, Troy Parrott, if he keeps developing. But I just think Smodic is the X factor we're looking for.
Okay. Agree on Parrott there, Gary?
Yeah, no, as Damo said, he came into my kind of sphere when he was a young player at Tottenham. I remember seeing him in a pre-season tournament against Inter Milan and Manchester United. He was sensational. He was so good. You're thinking, this boy's destined for the top. But as he said, it's difficult because there's huge pressure on you. And I agree with Damo there. I think it's brilliant. I think you cannot underestimate what a difference it makes to your game when you're playing regularly. You just do things naturally. And the fact that he is now playing regularly in Eredivisie and playing well bodes well for us, and I think he'll have a big role to play. I genuinely believe that. I
suppose the one thing, it was true of Parrott alongside Ferguson, and it would be true of Smodic in behind. There's not lightning pace there when we're kind of under pressure. You need somebody to run in behind. That'd be a slight concern. I know Ogbene, and we'll see who goes in the left wing. Maybe it's Johnson, maybe it's not. But that'd be one kind of glaring weakness with that duo up top.
Obviously, as well, as Damo said there, Parrott was playing the kind of deeper one, and you're thinking, well, you're coming deep, and we know that Evan's strength is coming deep as well, because that's how he's so good for Brighton. You're thinking, can't both come deep, and then the problem you have is then that the likes of Smodic and Ogbene, because they're putting such a defensive shift back, they're never going to make up 50 yards to get in behind as well. So it's about having that confidence, which you hope will come as the kind of philosophy is understood clearly, that those wide players, when the likes of Evan does come short or Parrott does come short, they attack from out to in, because they have that ability, but it's just getting them into those positions.
Well, look, it's difficult to talk about Ferguson at the moment because he's so obviously short in match fitness. You can't really judge him, to be fair to him. But Damien, ultimately, if say you end up with Smodic and Ferguson and both are flying fit and hopefully he's getting first team football at Brighton, Ferguson, as much as he likes coming short and being a target man as well and linking things up, he will at times just have to run channels and run in behind, I presume. That will be asked of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And every player will have to do that at times, especially when you're under the cosh. But I think in an ideal world, when you're setting up a team and you're going to play in a relatively low block and you're going to say, okay, we're going to counter-attack today. I mean, there's several different ways you can counter-attack as a team. I mean, you could put Ogbene on the top end of the pitch and you can just say, like, Diego Costa used to do for Chelsea under Conte, where he would just spin. But you need serious legs for that. And if you're going to play that way, you have to put an Ogbene at the top end of the pitch who's relentless in his running in behind. But there's another way to counter-attack, and I've played in teams that played like this, where you can have a fixture at number 9 who's a ball retention guy, but then the clearances have to be reasonable quality. So Ferguson has to take up a central position. He has to be really strong. Smotic is obviously going to drop in and help the two central midfield players. When that ball gets fired up to Ferguson, that's the trigger, that's the starting whistle, that's the gun going, where all of a sudden now Smotic turns and breaks his neck to get up level with Ferguson, and then your wide players. And this is part of I think the manager talking about being brave, is that the wide players, sometimes you ask your wide players to go back and help out a fullback. What you don't want to do is your wide players to go back, track the opposition fullback all the way in, and we end up playing a back 6. You see that quite often with a lot of teams, where the wide players are outside the fullback, and then you're kind of really stuck because it's hard to counterattack from there. So at some point, your wide players have to kind of almost draw a line and say, right, I'm just going to come back so far, but I'm not going into the back 4. I'm definitely not going level with my fullback, because then you got to trust your back 4 and say, you guys have to be good enough now. My centre backs, my fullback have to be good enough to defend in overload situations, and we're going to take a little bit of a risk there. But I fancy my back 4 to be my centre backs to deal with crosses. Okay, if you give up those wide areas and you say, okay, my wide players don't have to go back all the way into the back 4, you're going to suffer crosses. Then you got to say, okay, my centre backs better be pretty good now at defending crosses. One of my number 6s has to drop into not in between the two centre backs, but kind of maybe on the penalty spot, and we're going to hang our hats that you guys are going to deal with it. But then when we make the clearances, our wide players are primed. They are in the starting blocks now. And when that ball gets fired up to Ferguson, it sticks. He takes it on his chest, and then Ogbene has that pace to make up those 30 yards. And then and Greece do that, by the way. You look at the way Greece play. They break. You watch, those midfield players, breaking from midfield. You can just see them on the screen. It's just breakneck speed to get up. So I think there's an element of bravery in what Greece did against England. When I watched that game, they didn't send all 11 players back to defend. They left 2 up top of the pitch. Yeah. And they went, okay, the other guys can defend. So there's multiple ways you can set up to be a counter-attacking team. We just need to settle on what's best for us. So I don't think, you can still be a counter-attacking team with Evan, to answer your question.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And then do you want to just round off this portion of the chat on Cullen and Knight and our midfield situation?
Yeah, it's not ideal. You would like those players to be better, but it's not a club situation where the manager can identify that in the first transfer window. He can go and buy someone, until a better alternative or a better footballer comes around. He's got to work with what he has and needs to figure out a way, because they've proven they can play. When you look at it in the second half, now I know a lot of that is going to be Greece are winning 1-0 and they've kind of sat in a little bit and we've had a little bit more time on the ball, but they've proved they can play. Now to expect them to control a game like Rodri is a little bit unfair, but those guys can play. So the manager needs to put a system in place and get them in a situation where they have options, clear options, and they know that when they get the ball, they have to play certain passes and everybody gets them on the same page. But I think the manager is building towards that. Okay. Just to go back to the original point.
And they were good in those pockets. I mean, from 65, 70 minutes on, it was perfectly decent Irish performance. Maybe they didn't create anything gilt-edged, might be the...
I thought there was a bit of play in about, I think I'm looking at my notes here, 68 minutes. Remember when Taylor gets the header and it's saved? Look back on that build-up play from McQueevin, passed it out to Scales. We pass it, break the lines, pass into advanced wing, back into midfield, go through the Furs, out on the other side to the right-hand side then. Brilliant crossing, numbers in the box. That shows you these boys can do it, but can they do it consistently? And it'll be interesting, like Damo said, the fact that Taylor's coming into the fold, as is coming in as well. I know they're both offensive midfielders, but there's opportunities there to try and find solutions.
And did you think Greece, Gary, maybe owing to emotional turmoil of the week and going to Wembley and we're 1-0 up, do you think they just said, right, let's just sit in, fellas?
Yeah, I think they had a confidence. We said about when you're playing well that you trust your defence to see out a result. Okay. Even the fact that they made those substitutions before the key second goal was scored, that they felt comfortable enough they would see it out. And, of course, they're going to. The games do change when you go up, and we saw it more than anything in Finland, where we were come out in the second half, come out brilliantly, got the equaliser, got all the momentum in the world, and then suddenly just sat back and thought, "Oh no, now we've got something to protect. We're not going to go for it." And it's always that analogy. I don't play golf, but I remember Gordon Strachan saying to me, "It's like when you're playing golf and you've had a horrendous start." And then suddenly you just think, "I'll sod it, my score's rubbish now." And you just start swinging brilliantly then, don't you? And you start playing really well. So
a golfing analogy. Finally, Damien Delaney is interested in this conversation.
Someone just mentioned golf. Someone mentioned golf.
Now we're talking.
Finally.
Damien, last week, Gary and I were just talking about the Finland game, and obviously Nathan Collins was being discussed at that point for his mistake. And Gary said, "Listen, we just have to cut out the silly mistakes." And step forward, Caoimhin Keller. Right as Ray Houghton had spent a minute explaining why Caoimhin Keller was man of the match, you couldn't make it up. Again, it's that thing of, well, look, what can you say? Mistake in isolation, these things happen. But that is very much in our arsenal, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's not unlucky, not when it happens that amount of times. Not, one or two in a team, it absolutely can happen. But the regularity with which we do stuff like that, just speaks to our psyche, our mental. We're nervous, and it just feels like every mistake gets punished. And that's a confidence issue as well. You could probably argue that Caoimhin was a little bit overconfident. In fairness, if you watch it in slow motion, the Greek player done brilliant. He showed a real lack of interest. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, as Caoimhin put his foot back and his head went down, the guy just sprang. And you can afford to take those risks as an attacking player. So it was desperately unlucky. Caoimhin kept us in it in the first half, but that manager has to get that out of our game. Those silly mistakes that I think he said afterwards it was Christmas again for the Irish team with the gifts. So look, once confidence starts building, you'd be surprised how quick that stuff will just fall away.
Okay.
But as I said, he just needs to start rebuilding that.
Okay. So to round off the chat, then. Big picture, you both sound reasonably happy with this international window, not least in comparison to the last couple of years. You're seeing signs here of something being built.
I'm seeing signs that it gives these players an opportunity. It's not going to excite the purists, and it won't be pretty to begin with, but it's a necessity in terms of rebuilding that confidence, giving the team a platform. Simplifying it, I keep saying it, and I think it is a simplified way of playing, but it can also be a very effective one. I look at the window, Joe, and think, okay, where we were, how much we're struggling, we get the win, and ultimately, if you'd have took 2 draws, we'd have snatched your hand off, and yet we got 3 points, and that is something you've got to look at. But we're under no illusions, and I'm sure the manager isn't now, having worked with them. He might have done all his research with Scout. But now he's got an understanding about their personalities and what the problems have been. I think he knows now it's a big job.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, can I just say, one thing I'll take away from this window is I like what I'm hearing, right? Because we're obviously not in a good situation, but there has to be a recognition and understanding of where we're at. And I'm listening to this manager, and I think he's starting to see it. And everything he's saying, I understand. And I think he sees the problem. Now he needs to set about fixing it. That's obviously. But the initial thing is you have to recognise it's a problem. And we spoke at length over the last 3 years where some of the stuff that was being said after games. Was it accurate? Was it fair? Was it an understanding of where we're at, or was it a little bit of just ultra confidence? But you were kind of glossing over a lot of the issues. I think this guy has seen the issues. He spoke about them publicly. Has he got what it takes now to rectify it?
Yeah. And you've no problem, Damien, I presume, that we're now a team. We get a free, even inside our own half or halfway line, and it's centre halves up you go, and we're going to launch one. That's all okay. That's part of this process.
Part of the process, yeah. I mean, in an ideal world where we want to get to, that's not where you want to be. You want to have the confidence to someone just to spot it and play, right? That's where we want to get to, okay? But at the moment, every time we seem to spot it and play, we're increasing the risks of us making a mistake and conceding a goal. So what we said at the start of the chat today was, you need to stop the rot, stop the bleeding. And I think that he's just pared it back to basics. And that's what he's done for the players. And once we start getting a bit of confidence, getting a couple of results, then he might start evolving it as we move forward. But you can't get to that point where you can just win a free kick and someone just spots it and plays. And then you're like, oh, we're that confident that we can do that. We're nowhere near that yet, and that's going to take a long time, I think, to get us to where we want to be. Plus, you want to say integrating new players into the squad in terms of young players coming in from the 21s or new players that become available to Ireland. That'll obviously speed up that process.
Yeah, it's a bit like a golfer with now.
Sorry,
he was up again. Look, he was ripped up again. There, Joe. We have to do every golfing analogy we can think of to keep him motivated.
Well, then, before you go, I know you watched the England game. I feel increasingly sorry for Lee Carsley. The media have turned on him, and they're taking anything they can twist and making it several times worse. So, even the more generous headline I see even in the paper today is Carsley still trying to figure out what he wants on and off the pitch. The on the pitch aspect is kind of obvious given the experiment against Greece midweek and then obviously a shift against Finland last night where they won 3-1. The off the pitch confusion though that the headline references is that much has been made of the fact that in the initial TV interview he was asked about his candidacy, for want of a better word, for the job, and he made the point that, well, look, the next English manager needs to have, big CV and have won medals and be a world class, and that's what this job warrants. And so it was put to him in the press conference afterwards, Lee, we saw your post-match interviews. Based on that sounds like you're ruling yourself out of the job. And he said that would be the wrong assessment. And so much scorn has been poured all over that. So I think he's finding it difficult at the moment, Damien, on that front. Yeah,
I mean, look, nobody's going to come out and say, yeah, I really want the job, because then if you don't get it, you kind of left a little bit with egg on your face, or a little bit embarrassed, so he's kind of hedging his bets, he's kind of distancing himself from it without actually ruling himself out. I have no doubt that he wants that job. He could not want it, it's a superb job, but I suppose he doesn't want to commit to it, I actually, believe it or not, I got a lot of respect for what Lee Carsley's done, especially the game against Greece at Wembley, because think back about in the summer, everybody was up in arms at Gareth Southgate and his negative approach, right? And everyone said, we've got generational talent, we've got superb players, yet we go with a flat back five and 2 defensive midfield players. You've got to find a way to get the good players, generational talent in the team. And he did that, and it didn't go very well against Greece, right? So he obviously rolled back from that a little bit and went a little bit more balanced last night. But I got a lot of the media will cry, the fans will cry out for this new, way. When you look at Spain, all the top teams playing, we need to play like that. And the first time they do it, they get beat. That doesn't mean you throw the idea out, right? You've tried something, it hasn't worked. Okay, we're going to stick with this. We need to figure out a way to make it work, right? And that's part of the process of changing the identity of England. And then obviously the game last night, they controlled it. They were pretty rock solid. But I got a lot of respect for Lee Carsley and what he did, is that he gave everybody exactly what they wanted. Didn't go well, and he gets absolutely castigated for it.
He does, yeah.
And he said he didn't want to regret not trying something that he had been thinking all the time. And you're saying, and you're right, and you cannot, I don't care what manager, you cannot legislate for how England defended against Greece. It was shocking. You can't legislate for your goalkeeper coming into midfield and trying to have a couple of extra touches and getting caught on the ball. So even that winning goal for Greece, it's just, you've got 5-6 England players back and they just can't clear their lines. But as we know, Joe, that English press, they'll go for anything. And that's my only concern, is that Lee Carsley, like I'm sure all managers just want to be judged on his work, not necessarily the press conferences. He wants to be judged on what he's producing on the pitch. No, it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. It's not fair, but I think it's the reality at the moment.
Yeah.
Fellas, brilliant stuff. Gary Breen, Damien Delaney, thanks, fellas.
Cheers,
thanks, guys.
Damien Delaney and Gary Breen there. Great analysis from the two boys. It is kind of striking how a John Giles midfielder type will look at the game through that prism, and we'll focus in on Cullen and Knight, I suspect. And the two boys there watching with their centre half eyes. And I suspect they're spot on, but detected our centre halves being too deep in that low block 4-4-2 was causing all sorts of problems. And it does explain why there were those massive pockets of space where the Greeks kind of had at it. And, I presume if HH is at the wheel, that will be rectified for the next game. But it was a brilliant insight, I thought. It
was brilliant insight, especially if you consider me talking about, I loved our structure, we kept it together. But they're saying, actually, that's part of the problem, that we just sat there. And if you look, it's amazing how quickly Greece have just progressed from the Gus Poyet area, because they look like a big team now, well used to playing against a team you're going to sit back like this. They had all the answers.
Very easy on the eye.
Yeah, the number 9 would drop out, the 2 guys would go wide, their third centre half would push into midfield. It was just they knew everywhere to be. It
was beautiful. They made the pitch so big, it was difficult. So they had in possession, they had their back 3, 2 midfielders in front of them, then 2, I guess, quasi 8 number 10s, and then the striker, and then their wing backs high and wide, chalk on their boots, and just any array of angles and options. And it was difficult for Ireland. Like, wasn't a moral victory. We did not disgrace ourselves. Is how we'll sign up.
We need an email on what the happy medium is there.
Between.
There has to be.
Yeah.
Gave a good account of ourselves?
Well, all right. That's a contender. We will sign off for this podcast because, in fairness, we've already taken up too much time of Noel's. Sorry, this free thing, Noel, isn't quite what you're looking for.
Sorry, Noel.
We're going to pause, and we're going to be joined by Ian Madigan later on. We'll chat about the weekend at large. So keep an eye out for that rugby podcast on the way.